Stuka Joe here, and welcome to my first preview video. And you're probably going, well, what's a preview video? It's a video done after I examine the components of a game and read the game's rules. And the idea is to give you in 15 to 20 minutes a video that is much more informative than just a regular unboxing video. So, let me know if you like the format. Maestro Pancaldi. Stuka Joe here. Today we're going to do a preview video of Stalingrad, Verdun on the Volga. This is a game published by Last Stand Games, designed by Michael Rinella. It's an area impulse game about the battle for the city of Stalingrad. This game is published in 2017, which is 75 years after the start of the battle, which started in 1942. We will be showing the components, and I want to start by the artwork. We have a painting here, the Russians crossing the Volga, and that's what it appears to be the most important thing in this battle. The Germans have to prevent Volga crossings because that's the only way the Soviets have of reinforcing their tenuous foothold on the city. So, let's take a look now at the components. It includes 5/8 of an inch counters representing the forces of the German 6th Army and the Soviet forces, the 62nd Army under Chuikov, opposing von Paulus. And there's also markers for Rubble, Soviet control, and for units that are out of supply, among others. The counters in the game represent the forces of the German and Soviet armies. The Germans in gray, Soviets in brown. There are basically three kinds of units in the game: infantry, armor units, and pioneer units. Let's take a look at the information on the unit counters. This is the unit size. This particular unit is a regiment. The unit's name, this is the 276th Regiment of the German 94th Infantry Division. The unit type, and this unit is infantry. And here we see the unit's combat value and movement factor. Next to the movement factor is a setup code, which is used to facilitate the placement of the unit on the board through the use of the setup cards. Some units belong to a parent organization, and that is denoted by the background color of the unit type symbol in infantry units, as we see here for the German 71st Infantry Division. The color is also important in order to keep units together and benefit from a division integrity bonus in combat. Units that have a white colored background in their unit type symbol are independent units. They don't belong to a specific formation, and in the game these are the only units that can be rebuilt once completely eliminated. Although most of the German units in the game are regiments, there are several pioneer battalions, and each of these pioneer battalions belongs to a parent division. The importance of these units is that these are the only units that can clear rubble. Clearing rubble is not automatic, but the more pioneer units participate in the attempt, the better the chance. And rubble will be a friend of the Soviets in this game. All units have to stop upon entering an area with rubble. It increases the defense value of the units there, and overruns are not allowed. So what otherwise would be an overrun in a non-rubble area will not occur, and therefore the Germans don't have a chance of moving a second area in the same impulse when conducting an attack on a rubbled area. The game starts with a significant number of areas in the city proper with rubble markers. That's courtesy of the Luftwaffe that was bombarding the city repeatedly days prior to the attack that is represented at the beginning of the game on September 14, 1942. The game also includes 4 8.5 by 11-inch setup cards. 2 for the Germans, 2 for the Soviets. One setup card is for initial units on the map, and the other one is for reinforcements. So the game includes 4 6-sided dice, 2 in white, 2 in red. Also included is 1 player aid card with the principal tables and charts you will be using in the game. Let's take a close look here. We have the sequence of play summary. See, it's just 4 phases, but a lot happens, especially in the maneuvers phase. Then we have the movement costs summary. And then the always important Soviet Volga crossing table. And here, every time the Soviets want to cross units across the Volga, they have to roll 2d6, and they can only cross at night. And there's a series of modifiers, and you can see there that Mamayev Kurgan, which is area 33, is very important because it provides the Germans positive die roll modifiers that increase the final die roll, and the higher the number, the worse it'll be for the units attempting to cross. Also, there's die roll modifiers if the Germans contest or control riverbank areas which are adjacent to the destination area. So the Germans want to take control or at least contest Mamayev Kurgan and get to those riverbank areas as soon as possible. Otherwise, the Soviets are going to swamp the city with reinforcements every chance they have during the night. We have a Soviet fortification creation table. So that adds uncertainty to the creation of fortifications for the Soviets. And on this other side, we have German rubble clearance. Again, not automatic. And there's rubble here created every time there's an attack and a particular difference in the die rolls. It creates rubble in urban areas. And here we have summaries of how to calculate the attack value and the defense value. And this is for combat. Attrition points. This is the way that you reflect losses in the game by eliminating units or flipping them to the reduced side. And that is worth a certain number of attrition points. Retreat priorities, rubble effects, and surrender die roll. The game includes a historical notes booklet. It has a series of articles, 2 of them written by the designer, Mike Ranella. So it's nice to have this historical information. And you see it has some nice illustrations. In the back of this booklet, we have a summary of the combat ratings of the infantry and pioneer battalions, which were part of the German 6th Army. And the game includes a 24-page rulebook. It is glossy type, very well illustrated. There are many examples here. So it's 20 pages of rules, but there's many pages where the example of play covers up more ground than anything else. So this is not a complex game. I would say medium complexity. And if you've played Area Impulse games by Mike Ranella, well, you have most of the rules. You know them already. This game has particularities to urban warfare in World War II. You have rubble, creation, the use of pioneers, engineers. And we have designer notes here in page 21. Glossary, and then we have the same information as in the player aid card in the back of the rulebook. And here we have our map. This is the map closed. It is in 2 sections. It's a good quality map. Let's open it up. We have the map laid out 17 by 44 inches. It's an area map divided by areas. In game turns, those areas that you see there depicting the city and its surroundings are called, of course, areas, and that's different from these other spaces that don't have any artwork relating to the city or its surroundings. These are zones, and these represent larger extensions of land than the areas. And you can have combat in the zones and movement, but the rules are slightly different. And here we see the outskirts of Stalingrad. Let's take a look at the information in each one of these areas. Here we see the leather factory. That's area number 10. The 10 is an identifier, and when it is white, what that means is that that particular area starts the game under Soviet control. During setup, we identify all those areas under Soviet control by placing a Soviet control marker there. If the Germans ever take control of that area, we simply remove the Soviet control marker, and the absence of a control marker means that it is controlled by the Germans. The number 1 is the area terrain effects modifier. That is added to the defensive value of the units defending there. So the leather factory only adds 1, and the round gray symbol, that means that this is clear terrain or a clear area that doesn't afford much protection to units there. And if we move a little to the north, we'll see Sadovaya Station, another clear area, but with a terrain effects modifier of 2. You see there that the area's identification number is a 7, which is in black. That means that that area starts the game under German control. There's also forest areas in the game like Yelshanka, which we see here, with a terrain effects modifier of 2, and this one starts under German control. And the other type of terrain is urban. This is an urban area denoted by the black square, Spartakovka, and this area is worth 1 victory point. It starts under Soviet control, denoted by the white identification number, and it provides a terrain effects modifier of 3 to defending units. And in this game, all these areas that are on the west bank of the Volga are the ones that are valuable in victory points. We see here the Dzerzhinki tractor factory, the brick factory, the Barricadi ordnance factory, the Red October steelworks, the Lazur chemical factory, the oil refinery. Here we see the 9th of January square, the Volga station, also known as the docks, the food combine, and the 25th of October lumber mill. One interesting aspect of this game is the impulse system. The general rule is during each impulse, a player can activate all the units in one of his areas or zones, but there are exceptions. During daylight impulses, the Germans have a combined operations advantage in that they can activate units in 2 areas. So it's basically a double move. The Soviets also have that capability of activating units in 1 area and 1 zone, but only during night. And they can activate units in 1 area in the map and units either in Zone L, which is across the Volga on the east side, or Zone M. And these 2 zones are critical for the Soviets because those are the zones from which units cross the Volga into the city, and they can only do that at night. So the victory conditions are tied to these areas that are riverbank areas of the Volga. So the Germans win what is called an automatic victory if at any time they control all of these victory point riverbank areas, But it's not enough just to control them. They have to control them, and each of these areas must be able to trace a line of supply to one of the following zones. That is Zone D, Zone E, F, or G. So if that happens, the Germans win an automatic victory. But of course, you know that's going to be practically impossible unless you're playing against your 2-year-old son and he's not thinking much about the game. So the other way that the Germans can win is if at the end of turn 5 they have accumulated 10 victory points or more, and that is by controlling some of the riverbank areas, and those areas can trace, again, a line of supply to the zones that we mentioned before, D, E, F, or G. And the Germans have to watch out for this area here, Area 67 Orlovka. If the Soviets control that area throughout turns 1 through 5, the Germans suffer a 1 victory point penalty. So this forces the Germans not to concentrate all of their forces in the southern part of the city, but also to pay attention to the Soviets in this area here to the northwest. As to scenarios, the standard scenario lasts from turn 1 to turn 5, roughly from mid-September to mid-October of 1942. There's also a campaign game that lasts from turn 1 to turn 10, which is late October 1942. And there's also a mid-game scenario starting in turn 5 and going up until turn 10. And here we see the German reinforcement cards. There's a space there that you see that is only for units that will appear in the campaign game. Here we see the Soviet reinforcement card, and we see substantial reinforcements in the campaign game. Those reinforcements that have numbers in yellow, those are units of the 66th Army, and the ones in red, the 64th Soviet Army. When we think about a game like this, Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga, a regimental area impulse game of the Battle of Stalingrad, there's a lot of temptation of comparing it with other similar games, and one of those is Turning Point Stalingrad, published by Avalon Hill in 1989. Let's take a look at the components of both games. Here we see that Turning Point Stalingrad includes more counters, but a substantial number of them, 130, are half-inch counters that are used to denote control of an area and also to keep track of duration. In this game, each time a unit performed an action or participated in combat, it was out of action for a number of turns, and these markers with geometric shapes were used to keep track of how many turns you had to wait. In the mapboard area, we see that both are very similar, Stalingrad, Verdun on the Volga, 1 inch wider. As to areas and zones, Turning Point Stalingrad had 74 areas. That's 7 more areas than Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga, but Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga has 3 more perimeter zones. As to tables and charts, you see there's an asterisk. Both games bring a copy of tables and charts printed in the back of the rule books. And Turning Point Stalingrad has 2 sets of the same tables and charts printed on the setup cards, which means that the print is very small for these tables and charts, as you can see. In Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga, the game includes one 8.5 by 11 inch player aid card with all the tables and charts. As to setup cards, Turning Point Stalingrad included 2. In one side, a player had his initial forces and his reinforcements for the standard game, and on the back side, the units for the extended game. Avalon Hill did not include with the game the counters for the extended game. You had to purchase these separately. In Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga, there's 4 one-sided setup cards, 2 per player, one for the initial forces and one for the reinforcements. Now, the extended game for Turning Point Stalingrad took the battle up to November 1942, while Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga, the campaign game, takes it to the end of October. As to rules, we see that Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga has 8 more pages of rules. However, if you take a look at the rulebook for Turning Point Stalingrad, the print is very small, and there's not a lot of examples in the rulebook. When you look at the rulebook for Stalingrad Verdun on the Volga, there is a lot of space dedicated to examples, and I believe that this game is less complex than Turning Point Stalingrad. So this is a comparison of the physical components. As to the mechanical systems that each game uses, well, we could dedicate a whole video to compare both games on those aspects. So this is the end of this preview video. I'm going to follow up with the mechanics at play video, and I'm going to show you several examples that come straight from the rulebook, and you'll see combat examples, how the Germans use their air support and both sides use artillery support. The Soviets have a storm group support marker and hero markers. And we'll also take a look at the sequence of play and the impulse system and how suddenly the game can turn from daytime to nighttime, or worse for the Germans, a logistical pause, meaning that they can't attack anymore in the turn unless a very unlikely die result follows in the same turn. So, this is Stuka Joe signing off for now. Thanks for watching.